Okay, so as a quick announcement, on your tables, there are blank strips or sheets of paper, and that is for next week. Next week, we are having the Sexual Intimacy Week, and we will have a guest speaker. So we ask that if you have any questions that you would like for her to answer, we're not going to necessarily have everybody stand up and say them. So you can just write those down and then leave them on your table after you're finished, and then we'll pick those up and share them with her for next week. So we just want to make sure you know that. So Jamie's going to come around. We want to hear a little bit from you guys what you talked about as far as what's forgiveness. You don't have to tell us your specific examples, but any conclusions? Did anybody come up to you?
This is the interactive portion, so interact.
We concluded that you have to forgive someone as long as they're sincere, 70 times 7 times, which means infinity, Joseph.
Anybody else?
539.
I forgive her for putting my hand up.
Anybody else have anything else that, even through the scriptures that you've learned or something different? What does forgiveness mean to you?
I'm gonna just start putting the mic in faces. You got somebody over here?
I think what we were looking at is when the verses try to, and Tony said it good, it's when it's trying to tell you you gotta be like God, that's the hardest one. None of us are gonna ever be able to come close to that. So those are the hardest ones to try to mimic. Like the first one, and like I said, that first one was the prodigal son. I'm the older brother all the way, and I look at it and I hear about it and I'm like, I'm still the older brother. I don't know if I can ever get out of that role, but I try. But when you're being held up to try to be more like God, like in this case, the Father is really God, and we're just us. Those are the tough ones to have to do. Those are a big challenge.
Very true.
So we were discussing, what do you do with those feelings of hurt while you're trying to forgive? And do you forget or do you remember, and how do you continue to interact with that person when you're dealing with the feelings of being hurt?
That's a real place. That's a real place that people, that you get to. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what forgiveness is and is not. And it really, I think it will touch on exactly what you're saying.
We thought this was a hockey draft.
Wrong.
Anybody else? See.
Just a clarification, when Scott was talking about to be more like God, I once heard that when God stops forgiving me, I can stop forgiving you, whoever that you may be. And I think that's more like being in tune to that.
It's a high bar that you set.
I know, anybody? Drew?
So, just coming back from band camp, I'm on the MASH team, which is like a prayer team for band camp. And one of the things that a lot of times just praying with these guys who are coming in and they're either asking for forgiveness from God for something. If you just think of this image of God as being the Father in this first verse, in the story of the prodigal son, hiking up his gown and just sprinting across the field because he spots his son, and how just it's not a process, it's just done. It's not anything that you earn, but it just is, and I just think that's an awesome image. But just being able to receive that is forgiveness.
Thank you guys for sharing. So we have, in your book, you'll also find on page 7-4, 7-3, sorry, a list of things that forgiveness is not. So forgiveness is not approval of what they did. So in our situation, when we got back together, it was not me saying, oh, well, you should just never go to school. It was interesting, we did marriage counseling before we got married, and one of the pastors said, because I asked, I said, so do I just never want him to go to college? Do I never want that for him? He said, no. Love is, even if you never change, I'm still here. Well, I really want him to change. But that to me, and that was a serious commitment that I was making when entering into marriage, because it was just this unconditional state. But I can still want more and want him to be better. Forgiveness is not reconciliation alone. And so what that means, sometimes once we kind of talk more through the forgiveness process, we'll find that sometimes you don't get the opportunity to reconcile, either because the person won't come back, maybe the person passes away and you don't get to say, I'm sorry. Maybe, you know, something happens to you and you can't, you know, so there are many reasons that you may not be able to reconcile, but forgiveness is a requirement from God to do. And so they're very different things. And so we'll kind of tease those out a little bit more in the next few minutes.
And forgiveness is not pretending that we are not hurt, which was exactly what I did when we got married. I had just packed everything away. I felt abandoned. I felt like I was optional to her. I felt worthless because I didn't measure up to what she wanted me to be.
And so a couple things. There's also a list of what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is recognition that this is a debt that only Jesus can repay. Which, it makes it a little bit easier to look at the person that you're trying to forgive when it's not a weight that they're carrying. Forgiveness is the absence of bitterness and choosing not to carry that with you. And forgiveness is a process.
So, forgiveness is a process. So when we first got back together, we were definitely still in Egypt because we were just reconciled. We didn't forgive each other for anything that was done prior to. So there was no eating. We got married, and we were still in Egypt. So my vision on marriage, like, I thought we was gonna have fun now. Like, we married, this is good. Headphones. We can have sex all the time. Like, this is gonna be fun. And that wasn't the case. I thought I could lay down the law. Like, whenever I say go, she's gonna listen. And none of that happened for me.
Well, and when he said he thought we were going to have fun, I thought we were supposed to grow up, right? When you get married and we're a little older now, I have a career at that point. So, you know, we both actually had careers at that point. And I was still living out the I'm every woman dream. And, you know, I just have to live up to this worldly image of what a woman does after college. You get a good job, you have some babies, and you have a family. And that's what's important. When you become a man, you put away childish things. And so I was like, we don't need to be singing in the car. We don't need to go to the club or just hang out even. Like, we did nothing because we were grown-ups now.
So, what happens when nothing you expect out of marriage is there? So she wasn't fun anymore. She had an image to uphold. I felt like she kept trying to change me and mold me into somebody I'm not. Like, I just really wanted to be myself around her, and I slowly found myself losing parts of myself. So, I learned early on to be selfish. Like, my dad told me I could be selfish and my family could be optional. So, I went out and found someone to fulfill what I was missing at home. I just engaged in another relationship for about a month before she found out. One night I decided to hop on my motorcycle and ride to see this young lady at work. And when I got back home, I don't know if her detective sense kicked in or what happened, but she was like Sherlock Holmes.
And, okay, so on page 7-5, there's a model for the forgiveness process. So the first step of that is that the offense occurs. So we had what we thought was a beautiful picture. We had added an extra baby, so of course that made it better. But when this happened, he ruined it. I mean, he had shattered everything I thought I was working towards. I thought we were working towards. I thought we were kind of putting it back together. But something that was really important for us around the offense, and that's really important in this process, is the forgiveness process that has to take place before you can start rebuilding. I remember the first story I was told is that when I found out, the motorcycle became a source of such pain and just a reminder. So it had a meeting with the concrete several times that night. Its silly self continued to pick it up every time I pushed it down. So I said that's where it's gonna be. But that's a real place to be in when you're hurt and experiencing that. But also, so after that, I go back to my natural default of, okay, it's time for you to go. You go find something else to do because obviously this isn't what you want. I can figure this out. I'll make it work. So he leaves.
I leave, angry. I felt like what I did was justified because I'm a selfish guy. So I felt like it was justified. I didn't do anything wrong. She won't be gone. Fine, I'll leave. I don't know if I can call that other girl back because they had a long conversation, but I'm out. I'm leaving. And so I went to stay with my mom for a little while.
Well, for a night. Because the next day I go to work, I'm putting my life together, and I get a call about 5 o'clock. And they're like, Miss Fig, usually your kids are gone by about 2. We're just making sure everything's okay. Kids? Oh shoot. So I jump in the car and I'm rushing to get them from daycare, and it hits me like a ton of bricks. I can't do this on my own. I needed this. I need him. I'm sorry, I need him. And so when we talk about what forgiveness is, and and kind of, Alicia, to your point, it's a state, it's a condition of your heart, of the individual who's forgiving's heart. Because I had to be humble too. Because in order to enter back into any type of reconciliation, I had to come to the point where I was like, wait a minute, I forgive because I've been forgiven. And I had to repent for my pride. There were points where I told my husband, you're just a worker bee. I literally said those things to him. And that day, I don't know if you remember from week 2 where you had the repent model, and it means to change directions. That was the day I changed, and I would never say that to my husband again, because he means so much more to me than a worker bee.
So I get the frustrating call that she has to rush from work to go get these kids. And I was really like, okay, like you don't want me. I'm not going to get these kids. But in that, the call did something to me. In that moment, like I saw my dad in that car riding past my house. And I told myself, like, I'm not going to be that guy. Like, I'm not going to be selfish. I'm not going to be anything like my father was to me. So I came home that night. She didn't let me in the door, but I slept in my van for a couple days, and I slowly transitioned to the couch. And every morning I walked in the house, got the kids dressed, got them off to school, got them back home, made dinner. Like, I chose to make my family a priority so I can get away feeling the way my dad made me feel.
And so that is the first step where, again, we had to be in the right posture to even move on to the second step of the process, which is resuming respectful treatment and honest communication. Because had it not been for God coming in and changing us, we wouldn't have been able to move to that point. So I don't want to kind of gloss over that too much, but just that's the transformation that God really has to do to each of us individually before we can even start in on this process together. We are called as Christians to forgive, but we also must have reconciled marriages if we want to be together. So the first step we have to make sure is to deal with whatever baggage that we have going in, and then we can work on the relationship together. So, so then we started doing the work because I saw his commitment. I could tell he was different. There weren't excuses. There wasn't, no, I didn't do this. So we had to start doing our work. And so as you will see in your book, there are two different paths that people then begin. There's the offender's work and there's the injured person's work. So the first thing that the offender has to do is to repent and apologize.
So what that looks like for me was, I told her I was sorry several times. I didn't truly repent and apologize for what I've done until she called my kids upstairs one day and was like, you need to explain to them everything you did. And I'm like, wait a minute, in my family, kids don't need to be an adult's business. So I was actually angry at her for even suggesting that I should tell them. But I decided to tell them, and like it hurt me to my core to have to explain that to my girls because like I'm Batman, like I'm a superhero to my girls. And at that point, like I was truly sorry for what I did, and I did not want to have a conversation like that with my wife or my children again. And then I started thinking like, man, who am I to not honor the blessing that God gave me? Like when we first got married, I used to refer to her as Maria. And that's because I felt like she was personalized for me. And so I was like, no, there's no way I can hurt her in this way again.
And so at the same time that the offender is repenting and apologizing, it is necessary for the injured person to grieve. And really what that means is taking full account of what you had before and appreciating that that was good and going through all of the steps. Sometimes it's anger. Maybe I kicked the motorcycle again. You know, sometimes it's sadness and really being hurt. That's a process by itself, and you really have to be willing to sit in that. For me, it looked like making him sleep on the couch for a while and being comfortable saying, I'm not there yet. I'm still not there. I'm still, honestly, I will tell you guys today, the motorcycle was broken for a long time. It just got fixed this year. It's still a part of our journey because it has a representation. And so being aware of the meaning of things in your life and being able to say, I'm not there yet, is a really important step for the person, the injured person, to be able to do. Establish boundaries. Now it's back on the offender.
So my repair work, part of it was, man, I couldn't go anywhere without at least one child. So if I was going to the gym, there was a kid with me, like bored out of their mind watching me hit pads and all of that good stuff. But there was a kid with me. I had to discuss this situation with her anytime she wanted to discuss it. I had to be open and I had to humble myself, even if I was over it. Because most people will tell you, like, if you're the one that caused the pain, you get over it real fast. So I was over it, but I still had to keep reliving this thing and opening new wounds, opening old wounds, just until she got the satisfaction she needed, or until she thought the story was consistent enough.
And so that is the work of the injured person is to let it go. And so what that looks like though is really understanding that there is an ending point. So even for me having him tell the story over and over, I needed to know that it was consistent. And I had an ending point in sight. It wasn't just tell me this as a bedtime story or something. It was, I need to know that I know the whole truth. Because in the beginning, I did a little bit, but then all of a sudden, wait, there was a little bit more. There was a little bit more. And so it wasn't until I really felt like I had gotten the full truth. But once I was there, you do have to be willing to say, okay, enough is enough. And that's where real reconciliation can come. So at this point, you would think that the picture is complete. And at this point, it looks similar to the old, but there are cracks. And those cracks are the places where forgiveness fills and reconciliation cannot. Because the devil can creep in and out of those cracks if we let him. But if we allow God to transform us before even engaging in this, he can truly restore and transform and create a more beautiful picture than we could have ever imagined. And that's what he did for us. We got back together after this. Of course, it's not peaches and cream every day. But I truly believe that we have been transformed by the love of God because we've gotten closer to God. And just like that model that has been shown, as you get closer to God, then it'll bring you closer together. So we're going to send you guys back to the tables. We have an exercise for you. We're going to give you about 15 minutes for this one. There's some mirrors on your table. So we want to take the first 5 minutes and one spouse. This is not your books. We make stuff up. Our table will tell you I'm a little rogue. But there's a mirror. And we would like for you, one spouse, to take the mirror and look in the mirror and write down what you see. Good, bad, indifferent. Write down everything that you see and things about yourself. And while one spouse is looking, we want the other spouse to look at them and you write down what you see. Whatever it is that comes to mind. So as an example, you can say, I'm a stud, but you know what, I maybe drink too much, I don't listen enough, things like that. And then we want you to switch. We'll call out when you switch, and then the other spouse will do the same thing. Okay? And we'll come back.